the show. I'm Tasha Sims.
And I'm Marc Caron.
And this is Conscious Living, 100.5 FM in Vancouver on Co-op Radio Wednesday nights, on our YouTube channel, Facebook, and as well podcast at www.consciousliving.radio.org. So you've all heard the phrase, it takes a village. So we're going to look at that. What does that mean? Who's in the village? How do you find a village? We're going to explore that and also answer the question, are we in a friendship recession? Our guest is Florence Ann Romano. She's a personal growth strategist, author of Build Your Village, a guide to finding joy and community in every stage of life. She's been featured on ABC, CBS, NBC. She has a special place in her heart for family and community and loves to share her expertise and passion around childcare to parents nationwide, as well as cultivate social villages on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. So let's get into it. Community, connection. How do we foster this and live more joyful lives? Welcome to the show, Florence.
I'm so thrilled to be here with you both, and thrilled that we're also talking about this subject, because I think it's not the exception to the rule anymore. It's the rule, unfortunately. I hate that people are feeling lonely. They're feeling isolated and disconnected. And I think if we're going to diagnose that issue, we can go back to COVID and what it was like for all of us to shelter in place. All of us lose our support systems. That's really what happened overnight. Seemingly, we lost our world, our connection to the world. And as we've come out of it and we're starting to get back to that normalcy, whatever it is, even though we still hear that word COVID, and I tell you, if I don't ever hear that word again for the rest of my life, it will be too soon. But we are still, trying to figure out this rhythm to the world again. And as we figure that out, we're looking at one another, and there's another disconnect. Now that disconnect is, we don't know how to maybe repair those relationships, go back to those relationships, be active about looking for those relationships. And I think the reason why it feels like there's a recession is because we are waking up with this emptiness inside of us sometimes, this unfulfilled part of our hearts. And we're trying to figure out why we're feeling that way. And I do believe that the reason we're feeling that way is because the friendship recession is a real thing that we're feeling on a global level.
So I want to roll back a little bit. Is this, I think for a lot of people too, in during the pandemic, it was a realization that they knew a lot of people pre-pandemic, but they weren't actually friends.
Yes.
Because friends are there for each other. Right. And all of a sudden fear was ruling the ship, and people were choosing to see through that lens. And it really, people dropped off. People did not, at the beginning, certainly, it was like, this is a matter, it felt like a matter of life and death. What was important is actually was meaning and deep connection, not the surf. You couldn't go play hockey with the boys on Friday or go shopping with the girls, like all that lightweight. There's nothing wrong with friendship at that level. But I think what we're talking about today is meaningful, especially when you talk about a village or community. There has to be depth. This isn't just a let's hang out and have a glass of wine crowd, right?
I think so. Yeah. Exactly.
Go ahead. Yeah.
No. Pardon me.
So my question is, I see that as having been awoken in everybody because of the pandemic, but I wonder how related it is to the different stages of life, which I know you talk about in your book. So I'm wondering if we can just look at that and go the different kinds of friendships that people look for in their teens, their 20s, their 30s, their 40s. Right. I mean, it's completely different when, like, you're a mom, when you become a mom, you want to hang out with other moms, with kids, like dog people hang out with dog people. So there's, but can we touch on what it is in each stage that makes friendship different?
Well, as I say, the subtitle of my book is Finding Joy and Community in Every Stage of Life. And I want to go back to that proverb of it takes a village. And it infuriates me when people use that proverb only attached to people with children. what if you don't have children? Does that mean you don't deserve people? You don't deserve a community? And not that anyone says that phrase to exclude anyone, but I do feel like we needed to open that up to the masses so that everyone felt like they were entitled to finding where they belonged. And as we get older, the built-in opportunities are not there for friendship making, I would say. You're in school and you've got, all these people to choose from to form relationships with. And then you're in the workforce and you're friends with, people there, and you're networking and you're meeting your colleagues, you're doing all of that. And then life happens when you become a parent, and it becomes about the parents at the school that your kids go to.
Mm-hmm.
And then looking even at college students, that's school as well, but that's a whole different transition for friendship also for that age group. And then I look at people as they're getting older, get into that elderly demographic. And that's where it really gets lonely. That's where I feel a lot of empathy. I grew up in a multi-generational household, good old fashioned Italian family.
Mm-hmm.
My grandparents lived with us. And so I knew what it was like to have that really tight-knit village, but I also saw what it was like for my Nana and Papa, my grandparents, to age and start losing their people. And then thankfully they had us. We became their life. But they really didn't have any other connection to people other than us. And that can be very lonely when they also had a life the same way we do for so many years.
It's sad. And
it's
indigenous culture understood that doesn't exist.
Right.
And as you say, in a lot of ethnic groups
Right.
as well, they understand that, somebody's got wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to say that every senior is an elder. Like we had a guest on who talked about the difference between becoming old and becoming wise. And an elder is someone who will gladly share their wisdom. They don't get bitter and tighter and tighter. They're still growing and with a different purpose, basically. Mm-hmm. I wonder though, when you talked about the different groups, it sounds like friendship by association, like when you went through all of them. And so when you're older, because as you say, you're less involved in the groups or the schools or the workforce, there's less association, but there's a increased invitation to find deeper meaning. And that's the piece I wonder if we couldn't be introducing in these villages right off the top. What's friendship? How deep do we go?
Right.
What does it mean to be there for a person?
And not everybody is going to go deep with you in terms of their friendships. You're going to have different friends for different reasons. And that's okay. Not everybody needs to be the person you tell your deepest, darkest secrets to. However, these 6 villagers that I've created, I really want people to understand that, number one, it's about the quality versus quantity. I'm not looking for you to busy yourself 7 days a week and going out and meeting all these people. I'm looking and trying to charge you with finding the quality, the right type of people to support you in your life, depending on what stage of life you're in. Okay. So these 6 villagers are accepting, dependable, cheerleader, communicator, organizer, and healer. And I laugh though, because as soon as I say those 6, I can see in both of your faces, you're already starting to think about, well, I think I'm probably the dependable one, and my best friend's probably the cheerleader, and oh, this person's that. That's what I want everyone to do. I want that reflex to kick in where you're like, ooh, I think I can pick people in my life for these roles. And that's it. We're supposed to be casting these roles, these villagers in our lives, but also we need to look at ourselves. Who am I of these 6 people in other people's villages? How can I get better at being the villager I am? Or maybe I want to work on a skill so I can become another one of those villagers. And maybe also it's a time in your life where you cannot be the organizer. You have too much on your plate, but you can be a really good cheerleader right now. It's nimble. It moves with your life. It evolves with you. But those 6 people are your main characters in the play.
Can we
And
dive
that's who you're
in?
looking to cast.
I want to dive into those main characters because
Mhm.
I don't think they're easy to be or find. I think it's easier to be one because you're on your own. You can make that happen. Like you
Mhm,
do your
mhm.
personal work, but finding them, I think is, and we'll get to the vetting process in a second, but can you describe each one of those 6 and perhaps some characteristics of that
Sure.
villager?
So for the accepting, this is the non-judgmental one. This is the one that is going to be the first person you cast in the village. They're the one that meets you where you are and not where they want you to be. In terms of the dependable one, that's the one who's your emergency contact, the one that's going to answer the phone. I don't know if anyone does that anymore. I do, so I could be both of your emergency contacts. That's fine. That's the one that is dependable. When you're looking at the cheerleader, that's the one that is your hype man, your hype woman, your hype person, that if you're going through a transition in life, that's going to be the person that's going to be in your corner to help you through it. The communicator has a lot of different hats. I would like to kind of charge people with the idea of thinking about a communicator as someone you see on maybe in your community, on your social media or in emails, that is setting up maybe a meal train when someone in the community has passed away and they want to step in there to make sure that that person is supported. That's a really good communicator. And the organizer kind of be like that a little bit, but the organizer is really there to give you peace of mind in your life. You can delegate that to them and you have peace knowing that they're going to get things done. They're going to be an extension of you in that way. That's very hard to find someone that can delegate and give you the peace of mind. And then the healer is the one that makes you feel better. Simple as that. They're not there to fix your problems, though. They're there to walk through it with you, walk next to you, and ultimately be that North Star for you in your life. So those are very simple definitions that I'm giving you. We certainly could dive deeper into it, but that's to give people an idea of kind of how to start to do that vetting.
And then is your thought, how do you decide which of those villagers, which one do you start with? Let's build a village right now. Let's do it right now. Let's do it. Yeah.
So I think the best thing to do, because I hate reading books that you're like, start it and you get a few pages in, you're like, this is hard. This is way too difficult. And I'm not going to do this. You're going to be honest with yourself, say, no way, no way. So I want you to look at the landscape of your life right now and who is in it. Use those 6. Let's do it right now. Do you have those 6 in your life right now? Would you say you can cast those roles in your life right now, both Marc and Tasha? Can you do that? No. Some of them?
I don't. Oh, yes, some of them, but I definitely have been looking for years for that organizer. Okay. I clearly know what needs to happen. I just wish someone could do those parts. And I can tell you what the parts are. I can even teach you how to basically step 1, 2, 3, but I can't do them.
But you can't find that person. What about you, Marc? Who's missing in that village right now?
Oh, my village is pretty small right now, so I'd say pretty much all of it, really. I've got bits and pieces. So run me through the 6 again, please, and
sure.
Our listeners as well.
Accepting, dependable, cheerleader, communicator, organizer, and healer.
Yeah, organizer would be the big one missing, I think.
You said organizer too is the big one missing?
And then, it's like for me right now, just because of the way life has been, I'm still very much, isolated in a way. So I've just kind of been relying on self. So that's why I'm really interested in the topic, this, building a village and community. And
it's a great example though, Marc, because I know there are other people sitting there going, yeah, me too. I'm still isolated.
Yeah. Right. So and I find myself in my life filling all of those roles for me and my small circle. I've got a small circle of friends, I've got some cheerleaders and things, but to bring it all together in a cohesive community type style where everybody's taking care of each other. And I don't mean that in a way that we're being codependent, but that there is, everybody has everybody else's best interest at heart, where it's not self-preservation.
I think for both of you, what I want to start with is you start to figure out, okay, these are the people I'm looking to cast. Both of you said organizer to me, which I think is so interesting. Does my definition of organizer that I gave resonate with you? You're saying that it's someone that you can delegate to, that's going to give you peace of mind because you know it's going to be taken care of. You feel like that's the person you're looking for.
I would need to add and has skills that I don't have.
Mm-hmm.
So that co-creation
Right.
potential, like I'm very confident in what I bring to the table. I know what I don't bring to the table, and I'm looking for that person who enjoys what they do. That to me is, a producer, a person who makes things happen,
Right.
is to me part of a quality of an organizer.
And I think a good way to approach finding someone like an organizer, for me in my life at least, is I'm a big component of referrals. I'm a big component of going to the people in my network already, starting with the low-hanging fruit and saying, this is what I need. Because I'll tell you what, a lot of people in this world are very willing to help you, to help you get where you want to be, are willing to step in and be those arms around you or be a solution for you, help be part of the solution for you. But we are not mind readers. No one is. So we can sit here and say, I'm really struggling with this. But if we're not going out there and asking people for what we need and what we want, no one's going to be able to help deliver that. So I think it takes that conviction from you to start looking at your network, even if it's colder leads, perhaps, or not people you know as well. More often than not, people are going to be kind and are going to want to help if they can. So taking that leap of faith, of putting yourself out there and saying, I need help with this. That's hard for people sometimes, to be able to admit that I'm going to go and have maybe an awkward conversation or an email that's going to be unanswered or a phone call that's not going to be returned. I don't want to be rejected like that. But the only way this problem is going to be fixed is if we actually start leaning on what exists currently in our ecosystem as we build it out.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting to me that you see it as them helping me, and I see it as co-creation. I really yearn for it. It's like at the essence of my soul is co-creation. I'm very creative. I love the idea of the alchemy that occurs when two people come together and something new is birthed. So that doesn't feel like it's just to help me. It helps them also. So it's
yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's the second step. I think, Tasha, for me in my mind, is find that person and then allow the collaboration to happen. But I think I'm just talking technically, how do you go out there and find that person that's going to jive with you? And it's trial by error. You may meet some people that people introduce you to, and the energy is just not there. The chemistry is not there, but maybe that person will lead you to the right person. Again, that's starting to build a village. You were talking about the depth of relationships. And yes, I agree that these 6 villagers have a certain depth to them. They're, again, your main players in the village. But that should not devalue the fact that there are so many people in this peripheral village. I refer to them as secondary. There's the primary village and then the secondary village. Those secondary village people are very important. You would never think about it, but think about it this way. Your barista, if you're a person that gets coffee every morning from the same cafe and you have that barista that you see every day for years, that person is actually part of your secondary village. And it's not to say that that person is not valuable, because it's not a deep and meaningful relationship, but that person exists in your world in a meaningful way, in a way that maybe brings you a little bit of joy, gives you that caffeine. So you definitely need them in your life. But it's about realizing that don't put so much pressure on yourself to attach an enormous amount of weight to all of these people and think that if they are not in your life, in the center, everything revolves around them and you, and it's the symbiotic relationship, and it's all about sharing your deepest, darkest secrets, that it's not meaningful, because it is in so many ways.
I like that. That's good. And I totally get the barista reference.
That's the most popular one, I have to say, with people. Everyone with that coffee, it speaks to their
Well,
soul.
and dogs. If you're a dog person, which
Dogs.
I am, I have my dog people. Like in my
Yes.
Lucy's got her dog friends. Like it's like being having kids. It's a thing.
It's a
You're
thing.
right. It doesn't
club.
necessarily go to the
Yeah.
depth of your
Right.
being, but yeah, it's a village. So when you talk about primary and secondary, let's split that up. Let's stick for a second with primary.
Mhm.
Because these villagers, if you were to
Mhm.
say, I'm creating a village,
Mhm.
I want all these people in it.
Mhm.
So let's keep going with Mark and I, and you go, okay, these guys are missing. Let's do Mark. Where does he go to find an accepting? Let's go through them. Like, where do you find a person who's accepting?
So again, accepting is the first one I start with. I always say it's a very important one, probably the most important one that you're casting as you start. It doesn't have to be. You may say, you know, right now, Florence Ann, in my life, the healer is what I need. So I'm going to go there first. And that's fine. Go where you need to. But in terms of accepting, this is the non-judgmental one, Mark. So I'm going to ask you, when's the last time you confided in someone, or confessed a secret to someone? Have you done that recently to anyone in your circle?
Yes, I would say probably maybe a month ago or so.
Okay. And how was that exchange with that person? Is it someone that you trusted to be able to have
Yes.
that conversation?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I love that you bring up trust, because that's what kept coming up with me earlier when you're talking about building the village. And this is something that goes back for me a long time, where, you know, people reach out to you when they want something, right? Not to, hey, how you doing? People don't care. They care what you can do for them. But, you know, and it's just something I guess, and it's a funny story where years ago, my cousin had given me a phone call and I never heard from him for a long time. And it was the first thing was like, what do you want? Right. And he did want something. And I find that most people aren't calling to say, and this is where acceptance, I think, comes in big as well, because people don't call because they're just checking up and, you know, want to help you. It's typically they want something in return.
Right.
So I've put up some, you know, it, because everything has then become a transaction and an exchange.
Can I take what you're saying, Mark, and turn it into a different, just twist the question
Yeah.
a little bit? Because there's a question in there that I'd love you, Florence, to address. What would you say to people, whether it's to Mark in this case, or people who've been in community and been burned, meaning the trust has been broken? So whether they're looking through the lens of the past, their heart is defended or armored or careful, things have happened. People have shown them that perhaps they're transactional, or shown them that they are self-serving, whatever their history is. What would you say to support a person who's going, I miss a village, but I can see I don't trust. How would you advise them to proceed?
I have a couple thoughts here. First being, I have a chapter in the book about when the village burns down. And the village burns down for a lot of different reasons. You sabotage it yourself, burn it down yourself, or it's divorce, it's death, it's a falling out of a relationship, a breakup, whatever it might be. And I was actually just talking about this the other day with someone, and they said, what do I do if I want to actually repair a relationship with someone in my village, someone that maybe I'm missing, or I realize now after this time, after COVID, I didn't treat that person with the right respect or honor that I should, and I miss that person in my life. What do I do? How do I repair it? And I said, it depends on how much water is under the bridge, first of all. And it's going to take an apology, and maybe not just one apology, and maybe not even just one attempt at an apology. And then beyond that, there's the honesty and the vulnerability that comes along in this conversation. One of my favorite quotes is about forgiveness. And I believe that in repairing relationships, there's always some sort of subtext of forgiveness. And the quote is, forgiveness is giving up the hope that the past could be any different. And I love that because it opens the door for repairing something with someone, because you can't change what happened, but we have this moment now, and both of us have to want to move forward. So as you look at repairing a relationship, I also want people to be honest with themselves about why it is that they are going back to that person, or is it I've learned something from that relationship that unfortunately burned down? I'm going to be better now going forward and be more, I'm recognize this more, and I'm going to be more intentional about how I choose those different people in my life to support me and how I support them. But to your point, Marc, which I want to go back to, which I think is important as well, is you look at these relationships as transactional, like you said, and that's okay, because sometimes relationships can be transactional. But what I fear for you, Marc, is that it sounds like so many different people, sorry for the buzz, it sounds like so many different people in your life are looking at you in this way of being the answer to something or needing something and know they can rely on you. So what I'm hearing from you is that you play a lot of different villager roles to a lot of different people, and you're a safe place for people. They trust you. They feel that they can pick up their phone. They know that you're going to approach a situation with empathy and kindness and compassion. But I think you're feeling like, well, where's the reciprocation? I'm feeling a little empty because I'm not getting that from other people. And then that leads me to wonder, who are these people in your life that you've populated in this village? Because it might be time to start to cast some new roles and not burn bridges, but maybe do some weeding of the community, if that
I
makes
love
sense.
that. So how do we do that? How do you vet people
Mhm.
for being a participant in a village, for being one of the villagers? Oops, did we
She
freeze?
froze up.
Wow, we were so worried that we
Well, I
would
want to go back to
down.
the accepting
No.
villager that you told that secret to, accepting villager right now, because
But-
you told them a secret.
Florence, you
Now, I
froze.
don't know if you would cast them in that
Florence,
role. Would you?
Florence.
Oh,
you
you
froze
froze
for
for
a
a
second,
sec.
so we need to
Oh,
go
I'm
back
so
to
sorry.
the
Pardon me. I just saw it said it was unstable. So Marc, you were
Well, it's
saying
okay.
that person you told the secret to was, in my mind, okay, that might be your accepting villager. Would you say that beyond that one moment, if telling that secret to that person, have they been kind of consistently that accepting villager to you now that you know the definition of that?
Yeah, and I would say this person's more than just the accepting villager
Okay.
as well.
Okay.
Right.
And that's okay. One person can play multiple roles. You just don't want one person to play every role, because that's going to be a lot on that person. And you're also not going
Yeah,
to have
no,
your
of
cup.
course. It's just because there's other aspects of our relationship that's all intertwined. But
Right,
it's
right.
feeling that, that safe space to share, right? Of the
Right.
accepting, the non-judgment,
Right.
which is, kind of as we go back to just what you were answering before. And that was a great question, Tasha, is how do we regain that or bring that trust back? But it's the, everything's great until, something shifts, right? Where all of a sudden you're doing whatever you're doing and, something comes back. And it's not like I'm always looking for things to be transactional. But it's interesting then when you ask for something after just your natural give and take or whatever you're doing,
Mhm.
then there's all of a sudden a wall comes up, and
Mhm.
whether it's about money or business or conversation, right? So it's, yeah,
Is the common thread self-serving? Would those be the words that's sort of the common thread in part of the experience you have that's not fulfilling, that you find those interactions self-serving? Is that it?
it's sometimes,
So let me stop you there though about that though. If it's self-serving, that's the red flag for me to say, well, where are your boundaries then,
yeah.
Marc?
Well, and then my question was self-serving to me or self-serving to them?
To them.
Them,
I
yeah.
think I'm hearing you say that
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
there for them, but then when you ask, you get a wall or whatever, so it doesn't work for them and they have no problem letting you
Yeah,
know.
they get what they need from you and then they're gone.
Yeah, that would,
Right.
for me, that would be a self-serving. So let's touch
Yeah.
on that. How does one work with that in a village? Because I agree, Marc, people tend to be rather self-absorbed,
Sure.
self-focused. That's just, especially in this climate, that's what I'm noticing. And if you're a person who's more altruistic, that can be isolating because it doesn't feel balanced or reciprocal. So is that what you're talking about then, Marc?
Yeah,
That state.
yeah, articulated well, thank you.
So what would you advise? What's a step? Is it the picking? Is it one's picker might be broken?
Well, because I also acknowledge I'm the common denominator.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm the
Marc,
common.
I appreciate you saying that. I don't want, I always say what you mean, but don't say it mean. And I think you're that type of person, that you're very good at being able to express yourself, but you're also so generous probably with your time and your heart that sometimes you feel like it gets a little stomped on a bit. And I can relate to that. I think for a long time in my life, I felt a little bit like that welcome mat that people just kind of, rubbed their feet on and then, moved on with their life or their day and they got what they needed. And so saying this to you in the sweetest way I possibly can is I think the discernment on your part with the people you have in your life, we just need to make some adjustments there. I think what you're describing is very common for a lot of people, where I will sit here and have a conversation like this with them and we'll realize, okay, the common denominator is me in this, that these are my friends, these are the people in my life that I have chosen to be in my life. But beyond just that, every person is going to serve a different role. And like I said before, it doesn't have to be deep and meaningful, but it's about putting that oxygen mask on yourself first on the plane before you're going to help everyone else. And right now, Marc, I think for you, it's about putting that oxygen mask on yourself right now, kind of reinvigorating yourself and figuring out and also accepting that you deserve to have more support than you do in your life. You deserve to be able to have reciprocal relationships too. The transactional stuff is always going to be there. I can't eradicate that completely. It's just the way life is. But we certainly have control. You have control over choosing who these main characters are in your life. Just because they're there and it's comfortable and they've just always been there, but it's no longer a healthy relationship, even borderline toxic, it's up to you to start creating that boundary or cutting it off or flipping the script, however you want to put it, but it's going to fall on you to be the solution to that.
Yeah, and that I completely understand and has been part of the process over actually the past couple of years. So
weeding the people out.
Yeah, well, and just owning my own part of it. And then, like you were saying, boundaries is super, super important, because, my boundaries before pretty
no boundaries
so much, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah,
I
whatever.
understand.
And then all of a sudden I
there
started
too.
noticing these things come up.
Right.
And then I had to really go back and relook at them. And it's been an adjustment for sure. I just always make sure that I'm keep myself, in good spirits and, stick to who I know I am, in terms of what you were saying. And you kind of summed it up pretty good in terms of my belief of myself anyway. So
well, and you deserve to find your people. You deserve to find the people that are going to best serve you. And then you also best serve them. One thing that I have found as I developed these 6 villagers is, in the book, I talk a lot about my experiences in life and the different people I've met and the, kind of the different worlds I've lived in. And I feel like my life is becoming this mosaic kind of inside of me, where I take the best of these people and it all kind of exists in here. And as I live my life, I go in and I pick those pieces of the mosaic that I respect or that I admire. And that becomes part of how I live my life, how I treat people. But also the flip side of that is I've certainly had horrible experiences with people, and I am like, even romantic relationships. Gosh, there's past relationships. You're like, I know exactly what I don't want, to be, what I'm not going to, put up with. And that becomes a part of the mosaic too, to help you make better choices going forward for yourself, to make sure that you are being the best version of yourself so you can show up for others. But I think part of this work that's not difficult, the challenging part of this work that we do in Build Your Village, is it takes a lot of vulnerability, going back to that work, honesty with yourself, and the conviction to make changes. And transition, very hard in life. Just like anything, you have to admit there's an issue before you can actually solve it. And this book is about really doing some deep diving into what's going on in your life.
I love that about the book. It's a bit like a map with the quizzes and the guidance and the questions, so that you can actually sit with it and go deeper. So obviously going deep is my portal to joy. And I feel the invitation is there which
Thank you
is
for saying
which is
that.
awesome.
Thank you.
I wonder, let's talk just a little bit more because about fostering the qualities of the different villagers in
Mhm.
oneself. So you take a look and you go, I'm not dependable, let's say, or I really am not, or I'm late all the time, or whatever it is. If you notice that you're lacking in one of those areas, how do you guide someone to cultivate that and foster that quality in themselves?
This is going to sound a little unorthodox, but we live in a virtual world. We live in, technology, social media, all of that. And this is kind of fun, I think, for the millennial generation too, I would say. Look at the influencers that you see around you, the celebrities, the people you follow on TikTok, on Instagram, on Facebook, that you hear someone's going to be interviewed on an entertainment show. You hit that DVR button because you really like that person. You subscribe to what you think their values are, or what you see at least in front of you. I think we learn from other people to kind of, elaborate on what I was talking about before. Let's say I am having a hard time being the cheerleader, because, and that this is going to be a very real definition. I was a few years ago going through IVF because I was freezing my eggs. And I was hopped up on every hormone. I was a mess. And I don't think I could see anything besides what was going on in my own life. And my friends and my village and all these people that used to depend on me in such a way, and the way I used to cheerlead for them, I wasn't able to do it at that time because I was so tunnel vision. I was into myself. And after that fog kind of released, after all of that was done, I realized that I had some learning to do again about what I really needed to do to show up as the cheerleader in those people's lives, a little out of practice. So I started looking around me at my friendships, and even people I didn't know that well. Maybe I knew peripherally because of networking or work, or somewhat, even like Hoda and Jenna is a entertainment show we have here in the States, and a morning show. And I think Hoda is an amazing person. Her story, her history as a breast cancer survivor and single mother, she's an amazing person to me. And I look at how she talks about kindness so often on social media, and I am so intrigued by how she speaks that language and how she shows up for people in her life. And I have looked at her and thought, you know what, especially in that time when I was feeling depleted in that way, or that I didn't know how to do it anymore, I started looking at the way she was showing up for people. And I was like, you know what, I have something to learn here. And I started adopting some of that for my own self. And so that's a long-winded way of me saying that I was looking toward other people to help teach me that. But that's exactly what we should be doing. We are not supposed to have all the answers to this. I don't have all the answers to this either. But I look around at the people that I have in my village, the people that I wish were in my village, and the people that I admire for different reasons that are nowhere near my village. And I'm able to take pieces of that and create what I need it to be. And that's how I hone the skills of those villagers as my life changes.
I mean, it's an NLP, neuro-linguistic programming strategy from the 70s. That's what the whole movement was based on. Find someone who's excellent and actually decipher how they do that.
Study it.
How are they? Study it. How are, what are the characteristics? What are they doing here? And then begin to experience them. So yeah, I get that. How do you grieve the loss of a village? Because I got to say that my loss of my main village, I was never happier than when I was in it for 16 years. And when it crumbled, it was worse than my marriage breakup. I swear, worse, because my meaning, my essence, my sole purpose was connected. It wasn't just a romantic relationship. How do you grieve that and stay open?
I always love the phrase that grief is love with nowhere to go. And I think that there's beauty in that breakdown. When you realize that you do have this deep well of love that is left within you, and you need somewhere to focus it. And I think that's how you move on. And, healing, they say, takes as long as it takes, and some things you never truly ever heal from. I always say to one of my best friends who lost her sister a few years ago, and left behind 2 young daughters, And she was like, it's not okay. It's not okay. I lost, like, she was my everything. She was my whole life. We had this whole life together that we were planning, and it's gone. And I said to her, it never has to be okay. Like, I think sometimes admitting that to ourselves, that when the village does burn down or a relationship ends or we lose people, that we have to somehow tell ourselves it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. And it doesn't have to be. It's our job, yes, to survive it, to be able to live our lives, but you never have to apply logic in some way
Right.
to it and say that it's okay. So as you go forward and rebuild these relationships that have burned down for whatever reason, or you are grieving, I always like to try to think, well, how can I use all of this for good? And that starts to give you a purpose again. Then it starts to use that well in a different way. And for me, I can tell you, and this is a very small example of grief, but if I'm feeling very bad about myself, I know, for example, it was months ago now that I had a romantic breakup. And there were days that were bad. And I just was feeling really bad about everything in my life and where I was going, how choices I was making. And I was sick of myself. I was sick of hearing myself do all of this in my head and sick of feeling this way. And so I said, you know what, take out your phone. So I took out my phone and I started text messaging different friends of mine in the village that I hadn't talked to maybe in a minute, I hadn't checked in on. And I asked how they were doing, what was going on in their life. And I was getting text messages back about their lives. And the emphasis was no longer on me. I got to step out of myself for a moment there and say, you know what? I can be effective in other ways. I can use my breaking heart to love and use that in a positive way. And that's just a small example of how I have used technology or used my village to heal in a way that is very simple. It's a text message.
I know you use that phrase, let love in. That was going to be my next question.
Yes.
What does that mean to you? But I think you just answered it, because what you're talking about there, when you shift the focus to someone else and care about how they're doing, that is letting love in. Whereas if you keep the focus sometimes on yourself, it does feel, that's where I think we can literally, if we were modeling in clay, become this kind of, like, we're not looking out at the world at all anymore. It becomes an inside kind of state, right?
Right. Yes. Yeah. And let love in, to even take it one step further. And this comes from my nanny days when I was a nanny for a long time. Parents used to feel very competitive with me sometimes because their children attached to me, and you want them to do that. You want them to love the person that's helping take care of them.
Yep.
And I would always say to parents, instead of looking at other people in your children's lives as competitors with your love, look at them as additional people to love your children. The same way an aunt or an uncle or a godparent or whomever you would want them to have that relationship with your child. So letting that love into your life and accepting it and knowing that it comes in a lot of different forms. I don't think that's something we could truly ever have enough of. I mean, in life where everything is moderation, love probably isn't one of the things that we need in moderation. I think in life, we're probably always going to need more of it.
I love that. I never understood. I did have a nanny for a while, and I never understood. Like, to me, success was when my kid went, yeah, bye. Like no big, because they were so happy with that person and found joy with that caretaker. That was everything. Don't clean the house, just be with them for real. Like, that was gold.
Be present, love them, make memories with them, make them feel safe, joyful, all that. It's so beautiful that you came to that conclusion yourself too in your personal life.
I didn't know how to come to it. It just makes such perfect sense. If you love someone, you want them to be loved, like by as many as possible. Like, it's fantastic.
Exactly.
Let's go to
ladies, just to let you know, we got about 10 minutes.
Okay.
Thanks. Conflict. I want to touch on conflict, because as soon as we've got interpersonal relationships, we're going to have different perceptions, different points of view. And I think if people are not great communicators, it leads to conflict and sometimes stalemate. Any ideas there? Can we kind of dig in a little bit and about how people handle conflict or can resolve conflict in a village?
Sure. I think the organizer actually is a really good example of of conflict resolution, and so is the communicator. And let's use actually the communicator instead. I always say that the communicator is able to be kind of the referee in a lot of situations in life and a lot of relationships in life. Instead of turning up the heat on the stove, they put the lid on it. And I think in conflict, I heard it said the other day, and it paralleled my book, I think, so well. I talk about being consciously compassionate in the book. And that sounds, kind of pie in the sky, right? Consciously compassionate. And maybe I should just be able to say compassionate. But the reason I'm intentional with that word consciously is because I think that's the secret sauce to the conflict piece. If I can consciously be compassionate with someone that I'm having a beef with because we're on opposite sides of the political spectrum or whatever it is, if I am conscious and intentional about the fact that I'm going to say we agree to disagree, and the parts of you that I appreciate or respect, I'm going to honor that, and let's let this go because we're not going to agree, and I don't want to escalate this. I don't want to make this a bigger issue than it is. I want to be able to maintain whatever this relationship is. That's the consciously compassionate part of it. And the other side to that, what I heard someone say the other day to me, was another way of saying that could be indifference benevolence. Indifferent benevolence. And I loved that too, because they were like, well, we've all been to that holiday dinner where that crazy uncle's spouting out all this stuff and it's ruining the vibe of the whole room. And you're like, I've had enough. I can't take this anymore. And instead of flying off the handle and being part of the problem, you're part of the solution. And that, what? We have a difference of the opinion. Again, I'm going to leave this conversation with some sort of understanding of compassion and benevolence. So that's my suggestion when it comes to conflict, is try to work on those skills of being able to walk away. And that's really difficult to do when you want your voice heard and you feel passionately about something, but you need to weigh whether or not this fight is worth it. Not every battle is worth fighting. I think we're so heightened as a society today that everyone's ready for battle every second, and it's like, sometimes it's not worth the fight. It's just not.
Well, this tolerance for differences that you're talking about, to me, is a training. As kids, we're not taught that, because safety is agreement. Somebody agrees with you, you agree with them, and it's like, oh, we're good. Our relationship is safe. It's stable, in agreement. And I don't think we learn how to tolerate. We're completely different. We disagree, but we're staying connected and loving. Like those two things, we tend to either polarize and move away and create distance when we disagree. And so to me, this is a body somatic training where you have to teach yourself in that moment of, even if you are reactive inside, to breathe and stay present and know your own reality and ask about somebody else's. So there's a separation. You're not codependent. Absolutely. You're over there. I'm over here. This is where I stop. I'll tell you about it. Now, how about you? And there's room in a healthy relationship for both to be there without agreement.
Exactly, because discussion really is what you're saying. Conflict isn't bad. Anyone will tell you that. Conflict leads to solutions oftentimes. So not all conflict is bad, but the problem is, I think we also live in a society where we don't really listen anymore. We're always worried about what we're saying next. We're not really participating in active listening. And I think that's where a lot of conflict stems from too, is because we don't know how to do that work about communicating properly. And so it's really a moot point at the end of the day.
Yeah. And a belief that there's only one right answer.
Right.
And what if there's no right answer? There's your perception and my perception, and that's okay.
Well, and I think it's really important too, because in the past couple of years, we've seen so much of that, and if we talk about our village and our family and our friends and our work and community, there's so many differences of what the facts are, and the air quotes are for a reason. Yet how do we just, that agree to disagree, and be okay with it without creating the separation?
I don't think we really know how. The pendulum swings.
I was
very
going to
far.
say, it's
Yeah.
the pendulum, because
Yeah.
the pendulum is part of evolution. You've seen it in every great movement.
Right.
People have been oppressed, things have been a certain way, and the reaction to that is so far in the other direction that people who are moderate or in the middle are also excluded from the
Right.
thing that will, like the women's movement. It had to come back to center.
Right.
But it was extreme. There was no room for men on,
Right.
when it first swung, just as there was no room for the freedom of women before. So it's with every issue, this pendulum thing. And I think it gives me some solace to look at the big picture and say, we're evolving. It's not a dead end. This is not forever. What do I do while this evolution is occurring? Well, you do your part. Like, at least you've got something,
you
right?
do your part, right? And one thing my Nana always taught me was this too shall pass, and it always kind of does, right? If we look back at history and how far we've come, they say if you don't learn from history, you're doomed to repeat it. And I do believe in that. But I also think what we learn from history too is everyone kind of gets their turn. This group gets their turn, this group gets their, and somehow, some way we try to find that happy medium. But we live in a very black and white world in terms of where's that gray. That gray is becoming such a small piece of those two little circles there. There's not much room there in the middle with that gray anymore. I think we're just seeing that black and white. And we need to find out how to merge those circles more and more to find that middle, that gray, because that is where a lot of this conflict resolution exists, is in that gray. Compromise. It's like a dirty word these days. God forbid we compromise.
If you only see two choices, I think you're off.
Right, exactly.
So to me, the word's third choice. What's the third choice? Well, there's what's the third choice? And usually there's fourth and fifth and sixth. There's way more.
If there's not at least three, you just have to make a decision. There's no choice in two.
Right.
It's three or more. Now you have choice.
Right.
And I think that's a powerful statement, like you say, Tasha. And I always like to say every coin has three sides.
Yeah, that's good.
Right.
It's a good point.
And how do you travel on the outside of that coin, and to be able to see the both sides and not get so polarized that you are burning relationships or destroying your village, or whatever that might be.
And for me, the answer to that is somatic, because the head, the mind, likes right and wrong. It likes to see what's wrong. It likes to discern. It's like this or that. Right. Right.
Yeah. Right.
But when you're centered in your body and your heart is actually open, there are multitudes of possibilities and choices. It's a softer, less, well, there's no agitation. It just is, you're okay not knowing, actually. Perhaps part of the center is, because then new information can come in. If you're certain, if you are certain, I would say 9.999 times out of 10. If you're certain, you're probably off.
Yeah, exactly.
That's our joke. I'm a recovering certainty addict.
Same.
Yeah, me too.
Awesome. Well, we're running out of time, ladies, so we'll need to wrap it up.
Okay,
so, tell us, just direct people if they want to find your book and hear more about what you're up to.
So florenceann.com is my website. You could pick up a copy of Build Your Village there. It comes out officially February 21st. So we're just days away from that right now we talk. And I answer every DM on Instagram or Facebook. If you should reach out to me, florenceann.com there as well. Think of me as your virtual village. You're not in it alone. I very often am DMing with people when they're talking about exactly the same things we are today. How do they take that first step? And I'm here to be next to you during that.
Awesome. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks so much, Florence.
Me too. Thank you both.
We've been speaking with Florence Ann Romano, Build Your Village, a guide to finding joy and community in every stage of life, out in a couple of days. Get it at all the usual suspects, right? Amazon,
everywhere,
all the places.
Even the audiobook, which is narrated by me.
Oh, fantastic. And it's fun. It's really a cool book if you're feeling isolated, or even if you're not and you want to just get clear about who's in your life. Check it out. Super book. Thanks for